On Christmas Eve 1945, as snow blanketed the hills of Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family prepared for what should have been a joyous holiday morning. George and Jenny Sodder had built a comfortable life in their two-story home, raising 10 children with the promise of the American dream. By midnight, 5 of those children would vanish without a trace, leaving behind one of the most perplexing mysteries in American history. George Sodder was a successful businessman who had emigrated from Italy decades earlier. He owned a trucking company and had recently paid off his house, a symbol of his hard-earned success. But George had made enemies. As World War II raged, he had been vocal in his criticism of Mussolini's fascist regime, drawing the ire of local Italian Americans who supported the dictator. Strange incidents had been plaguing the family for months. A life insurance salesman had visited earlier that year, becoming aggressively hostile when George refused his services.
"Your house will go up in smoke," the man had threatened, "and your children will be destroyed."
George had dismissed it as the ravings of a disgruntled salesman, but the words would soon prove chillingly prophetic. Just weeks before Christmas, George discovered that the phone lines to his house had been cut. Peculiar visitors had been asking questions about the family's routines around town. His oldest son had even spotted unfamiliar men watching their house from parked cars. The Sodders felt increasingly uneasy, but nothing could have prepared them for what was about to unfold. That fateful evening, the family had enjoyed a modest Christmas celebration. The children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, had gone to bed excited about the presents waiting under the tree. George and Jenny retired around 10:30 p.m., while their teenage sons Marion and John stayed up a bit longer to play with new toys. At 1:30 a.m., Jenny was awakened by the phone ringing. A woman's voice asked for someone who didn't live there, then abruptly hung up. Jenny noticed the lights were still on downstairs and the front door was unlocked, unusual for her security-conscious family. She turned off the lights and locked the door before returning to bed. Less than an hour later, she awoke to the smell of smoke. The house was engulfed in flames. George and Jenny, along with 4 of their children, managed to escape the inferno. But 5 children, Morris, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5, remained trapped on the second floor. George frantically tried to save them, but the ladder that was usually propped against the house had mysteriously disappeared. His trucks, which he might have used to reach the upper windows, wouldn't start despite working perfectly the day before. In desperation, George broke down the basement door to find his water barrels, but they were frozen solid. The family watched in horror as their home burned, with no way to reach the children trapped inside. When the Fayetteville Fire Department finally arrived, the house had been reduced to ashes. Fire Chief F.J. Morris conducted what could generously be called a cursory investigation. After just 4 hours of sifting through debris, he announced that the fire had been electrical, and that the children's bodies had been completely consumed by the flames. This explanation immediately struck the Sodders as impossible. House fires, even intense ones, leave bone fragments and teeth. The fire had burned for only 45 minutes before collapsing, not nearly long enough to completely cremate 5 bodies. Yet Morris claimed that the fire had burned so hot that nothing remained. The state fire marshal conducted his own investigation and reached the same conclusion, but he spent even less time examining the scene. When George hired a private investigator, more disturbing details emerged. The phone lines had indeed been cut, but not by the fire. Someone had deliberately severed them before the blaze began. Most shocking of all, several witnesses came forward to report seeing the missing children after the fire. A bus driver claimed he saw the children in a car speeding away from Fayetteville that night. A woman at a restaurant 50 miles away said she served breakfast to the 5 Sodder children the morning after the fire, accompanied by Italian-speaking adults who wouldn't let the children speak. As George dug deeper, a sinister picture emerged. The life insurance salesman who had threatened the family was later revealed to be connected to a local crime ring. The fire chief himself had stolen a block and tackle from George's property during the investigation, equipment that might have been used to remove the ladder from against the house. Most disturbing were the connections to organized crime and human trafficking. In the 1940s, children were sometimes kidnapped and sold to childless families, particularly those who could pay well and ask no questions. George's vocal opposition to Mussolini had made him a target, and his children valuable pawns. A taxi driver later admitted that he had been paid to cut the Sodders' phone lines. The family's eldest daughter, who lived away from home, received a threatening phone call the night of the fire, warning her to stay away. Even the coroner seemed to be part of the cover-up, refusing to hold a proper inquest. For the rest of their lives, George and Jenny Sodder refused to accept that their children were dead. They erected a billboard along Route 16 with the children's photographs and offered a reward that eventually grew to $10,000, a substantial sum for the era. "What happened to our children?" the sign demanded. The family hired private detectives and followed up on hundreds of leads. In 1968, they received a photograph in the mail showing a young man who bore a striking resemblance to Louis, their missing 9-year-old son. On the back was written, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Elil boys, a 90,132 or 35. The photograph appeared to have been taken in a city, and the man looked to be about the right age. George and Jenny spent their life savings pursuing leads across the country. They traveled to orphanages, followed up on tips, and never stopped believing their children were alive somewhere. George died in 1969, still searching. Jenny continued the quest until her death in 1989. Today, the Sodder children case remains one of America's most compelling unsolved mysteries. The official story, that 5 children completely vanished in a house fire, defies forensic science and common sense. The evidence points to a carefully orchestrated kidnapping, possibly connected to organized crime and George's political enemies. Some investigators believe the children were sold to families in other states or even other countries. Others theorize they were killed and their bodies disposed of elsewhere, with the fire serving as cover for the crime. What seems certain is that the fire was deliberately set and that local authorities were either incompetent or complicit in covering up the truth. The Sodder family's quest for answers has inspired books, documentaries, and countless amateur investigators. Their story serves as a haunting reminder that sometimes the most innocent victims of adult conflicts are children, and that justice can be as elusive as smoke in the wind. On every Christmas Eve since 1945, someone has left flowers at the site where the Sodder house once stood, a memorial to 5 children who vanished into the night and a family's undying love that refused to let them be forgotten.